MPs are warning peers not to let dying people down. Now, protesters have accused peers of foot-dragging the assisted dying bill with over 1,000 amendments. Now, this comes as the House of Lords insists that the massive gaps in the legislation are responsible for delaying the bill. Well, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, you've been covering the story since the very, very beginning. You've been to Canada, you've been around the world looking at their legislation and the perils, the pitfalls. This is going through the Lords now. Why is it taking so long? They're claiming on the Labour side that the Lords are trying to derail it, but aren't the Lords just doing their job? This is checks and balances.
Well, the Lords is there to scrutinise and revise legislation to make it better if possible. So the Lords will say that they are absolutely doing their job. Now, the supporters of the bill are telling people that they're dragging their heels and that they're filibustering in an attempt to time this bill out. And Kim Leadbeater, whose private member's bill this is, we're told that the government is neutral, although I think many people think that this has got a lot to do with the Prime Minister, who is very passionate about this. The Lords do not have to vote this through because this is not a government bill. It is not in Labour's manifesto. They could have put it in, but they didn't. And so the Lords are entirely within their rights to scrutinise and take time. You see Theresa May speaking there. Some of the many holes that people feel are in this bill are, for example, we've just heard that a pregnant woman with a pregnancy which is viable, so over 24 weeks, can qualify for an assisted death. That would obviously mean that the baby would die.
What?
As well. If you are homeless, if you're a military veteran, if you're disabled, if you're depressed, as long as you can find two doctors who will say that on the balance of probability that you might die in less than 6 months, you can go ahead. You can go ahead primarily because you feel a burden or because the care is not there. And I think at a time when the government is only funding about a third of hospice care, yet the government is going to have to, presumably if this goes through, fund all of assisted dying. It is potentially quite problematic. And Kim Leadbeater, just one more thing, I'll stop talking, told me earlier when I interviewed her for GB News that they are listening to the experts. Just worth saying that a whole host of medical professions, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, physicians, disability rights, British Geriatric Society, Mind, Association for Palliative Medicine, and many, many others have all said that the bill in its current form is not safe.
This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect yourself this Christmas with one of the best VPNs out there. Cybercriminals are out to get your bank account information while you do your Christmas shopping online. But you can protect your privacy, money, and identity now with ExpressVPN for as little as 8 pence a day. Click the link now to claim up to 75% off.
Huge amount of concern there. Thank you very much, Catherine. Stick with us. I'm joined by my next guest now. That's the former Director of Legislative Affairs at Number 10, and that's Nikki Da Costa. Nikki, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you. But you would have heard Catherine Forster there outlining, I think, a few very, very serious concerns. A lot of people will be astonished to learn, for example, that a mother who's pregnant can have her life taken and the baby will die with her.
Yes. And it's extraordinary. This is there are just 5 amendments that the supporters of the bills are signalling out as, and they actually single this out, and they say, you know, this is an astonishing amendment delay. It's actually relevant for a whole host of reasons. The ethical questions, which are flagged by the Equality and Human Rights Commission in their written submission to the Select Committee. It's flagged as a moral issue by the government's own impact assessment that doctors may feel uncomfortable. Fancy that. And it's also relevant to the mother. If the mother's metabolism of drugs changes, then what is being sold to her as, you know, an easier death which will also obviously happen to her baby as well, will not come about. And we have data from, I think it's Oregon, where the complications increase with the youth of the patient, so obviously pregnant women, and also their status. So this is really complicated. And we heard that Lord Faulkner said, I don't want to look at this issue. I don't think it's something we need to deal with. Yet every other jurisdiction has dealt with this, and there are guidance on it, and it's very, very morally complicated. He was asked outright, do you favour more that the mother shouldn't have the assisted death until after the child is delivered, or do you favour that the child should be killed first and then the mother? But these are the kind of complex issues that the other side say, ignore them, they don't need to be dealt with. The Lords are doing a hugely difficult job dealing with legislation which has never had a policy process or any consultation.
Nikki Da Costa, a great many people have had great concerns from the outset that this is politicians playing God. And in particular, Keir Starmer seems determined to get this through. Here's a guy that's done a U-turn on practically every other position that he's ever taken. But on this one, he seems absolutely resolute. Is it fair to say that this is now becoming Keir Starmer's almost raison d'etre in politics? And if so, why?
I think it's absolutely his bill. He's been very clear. It's the one thing that he seems to be really passionate about. We saw last week that there was a leak of a paper that he had his team draw up in opposition prior to the general election on how to do this, explicitly identifying the private members bill process, which is the least legislatively robust process for something of this consequence, as the way for the government not to have to take responsibility for the content, for the difficult moral arguments, but still be able to control the timetable, the content, the sponsors. So it's real sleight of hand here. And we heard in the Commons how Keir Starmer put out the message that he was going to vote at third reading, and all those MPs that were quavering and at the time were thinking about, do I vote for this? They thought, well, if I want a job, I better go through the lobby with Keir Starmer. It's his bill. And what the government is doing in this regard is essentially putting all the weight of the government machinery and taking none of the responsibility. And what that means is, Keir Starmer was asked at PMQs, would he guarantee that the bill was safe? And he wouldn't. He would say it was workable, enforceable, and operational, but not that it's safe. And we hear ministers say that time and time again. They will not guarantee its safety for vulnerable groups.
OK, Nikki Da Costa, Catherine Forster is with me. She'd like to ask you a question.
Nikki, we know that Dignity in Dying is a very well-funded campaign group. I think they spent £1.5 million on publicity in the last year or so. Kim Leadbeater this morning saying that MPs were elected and that the Lords are not, and that they must not thwart democracy. But I'm right in thinking, am I not, that because this wasn't in the manifesto, the Lords do not have any obligation to actually let this pass?
Absolutely. There are very clear rules about the role of the two houses. Both houses have an absolute right to scrutinise and reject, and the Constitution Committee has confirmed that the Lords has the right to reject it and to take their time scrutinising it, noting the inadequacies of the process so far. But more than that, the primacy of the Commons is protected as it goes to the manifesto, because it is the Commons representing the public's will. So what the public have voted for at the ballot box is what the Lords should concede to. This was never put to the public. Labour deliberately excluded it from their manifesto. It has no public mandate. It's the public that matter here. If the government wanted to do this, if the likes of Kim Leadbeater wanted this, then it should go to the public and they should have a say prior to this legislating in this way.
Nikki, can I ask you one final question, if I could? And it's this. This week, we heard 25 more Labour peers are going to be stuffed into the House of Lords. We thought that might be to block future government legislation, perhaps from Reform UK. But I put it to you, could these 25 Labour peers extra be used to try and bundle this rule through?
Absolutely. I'm very geeky. I've done the analysis on the defeats that have happened so far since the government was elected. On the current trajectory of appointments, they appointed net 38 peers in this session. They're planning on doing 25 at Christmas. On this trajectory, they will eliminate defeats by about 2027. They'll reduce by 90%. And what that means is that essentially the government can get its way on most things, and it's significantly undermining the House.
Nikki Da Costa, that is an incredible thing to get your head around. You know, we have here politicians playing God, and we have the numerics being adapted to ensure that they can get their way. I think a great many people would have a lot of concerns about that. Nikki Da Costa, thank you very, very much for joining us on the show today. Catherine Forsey, you've been superb on this story right from the very, very beginning. Thank you for joining me again today. Thanks both.